life would be signed over to a man the moment she said, "I do." It wasn't just a traditional lifestyle, it was a legal disappearance. Here is exactly what she would face. 1. The legal disappearance, coverture. Under a law called coverture, a married woman had no legal identity. She couldn't sue anyone, she couldn't be sued, and she couldn't sign a contract. Legally, she and her husband were one person, and that person was him. She was essentially a ghost in the eyes of the government. 2. Zero rights to money or property. The paycheck, as you pointed out, if she worked, her husband owned her wages. He could legally go to her employer and demand her pay. Inheritance. If her father left her a house or money, it immediately became her husband's property to sell, keep, or gamble away. Bank accounts. She couldn't open an account in her own name. She had to ask for allowance for every loaf of bread or pair of shoes. 3. No control over her own body. Domestic violence. In many places, it was legal for a husband to discipline his wife physically. The law viewed it as a private domestic matter, not a crime. No. A woman had no legal right to refuse her husband. She was expected to provide children and labor whenever he demanded it. 4. No rights to her children. This is the part that would break most women today. If a couple split up, the father almost always got custody. The woman had no legal claim to her own kids. He could even send them away to work or live elsewhere, and she couldn't stop him. 5. No education or careers. Most professional jobs, law, medicine, etc., were completely banned for women. They were expected to stay in the domestic sphere, cleaning, cooking, and raising kids, with no hope of a different life unless a man allowed it. It took 72 years of protesting and fighting just to get the right to vote in 1920, and even longer to change these property laws. For a woman in 2026 to say she wants to go back is like saying she wants to be a prisoner in her own home. Would you like me to look up any? It's made it very clear who was in charge. It wasn't a partnership. It was a hierarchy where the man was the absolute head of the house. Here are the specific ways the law backed up a man's control. 1. The right of physical correction. Under common law, a husband had the legal right to use moderate correction on his wife. This meant he could physically punish her for misbehavior, or for not following his orders, and the police or the courts wouldn't interfere. It was considered his private business to keep his household in line. 2. The law of domestic service. A wife's labor was legally owned by the husband. This didn't just mean her paycheck from an outside job, it meant her work inside the house too. If she spent all day cooking, cleaning, and raising kids, the law viewed that as a service she owed to her husband in exchange for him providing food and a roof. She couldn't quit or demand a different life. 3. Absolute control of the domicile. The husband had the sole right to decide where the family lived. If he decided to move the family across the country, the wife had a legal duty to follow him. If she refused to go, she could be charged with desertion, which meant she could lose her children and any right to financial support. 4. No legal standing. A woman couldn't even testify in court against her husband in most cases. If he committed a crime against her or mismanaged her family's money, she often had no way to speak up in front of a judge because the law didn't recognize her as an independent person. 5. Control of the children's future. The father had the final say on everything regarding the kids, their education, what trade they learned, and even who they married. He could even apprentice a child out to work in a factory or on a farm and collect their wages for himself, and the mother had no legal power to stop it. When women in 2026 say they want that life, they are talking about a world where their husband's permission was the only law that mattered. It took decades of fighting to break those specific household chains. Would you like me to look up any other details about what life was like for men back then? Or should we talk about the house? He owned the people in it. Here is the rest of the raw truth about what women in 2026 don't realize they'd be signing up for. 1. The civil death of marriage. The second a woman got married in the 1800s, she experienced what lawyers called civil death. This meant she could no longer sign a contract, buy a piece of property, or even write a will to leave her belongings to her own children. Only the man had a legal signature. If he died without a will, the property often went to his male relatives, leaving her with nothing. 2. Number right to no? In the 1800s, the law did not recognize the concept of a woman saying no to her husband. Marriage was considered a permanent legal consent to whatever the husband wanted. She had zero bodily autonomy. If she tried to leave or run away, the husband could legally have the police bring her back to the house by force because she was viewed as property that had been stolen from him. 3. The rule of thumb. While people debate the origin of the phrase, the legal reality was that a husband could discipline his wife with a stick or a switch, as long as it wasn't thicker than his thumb. The courts literally turned a blind eye to domestic violence as long as the man didn't permanently disable or kill her. A woman in 2026 who wants this lifestyle is wishing for a world where she has no protection from a man's temper. 4. No education, no independent future. Women were systematically blocked from higher education. Most universities wouldn't admit them, and they weren't allowed to become lawyers, doctors, or ministers. Their only career was marriage. If a man decided his wife didn't need to read or learn anything beyond housework, that was his right. He controlled her mind just as much as he controlled her money. 5. Divorce was a death sentence. Even if a woman was being treated like a slave, getting a divorce was nearly impossible. She had to prove extreme cruelty or abandonment, and even then, she would be socially ruined. She would lose her home, her reputation, and, most importantly, her children. The man almost always kept the kids because he was the one with the money and the legal right to them. It took 72 years of women being treated like this before they even got the right to vote and start changing these laws. When women today say they want to go back to the 1800s, they are literally asking to be a civilly dead person with no rights to their own body, their own money, or their own kids. Do you want me to find hundreds chains started because women were tired of being civilly dead? It took 72 years of hell to get from the first meeting to actually winning the right to vote in 1920. Here is how that 72-year war went down. The 1848 spark. It all started at the Seneca Falls Convention. A group of women, and some men, got together and wrote a document saying it was self-evident that women should have the same rights as men. People at the time thought they were insane. They were mocked in the newspapers and called unnatural. The Civil War pause. When the Civil War broke out in the 1860s, women put their fight on hold to help the country. They thought that after the war, they'd be rewarded with the right to vote. They were wrong. The government gave the vote to formerly enslaved men, but told women to wait their turn. The split. This caused a massive rift. Some women wanted to play nice and go state by state, while others, like Alice Paul, wanted to get aggressive. They started picketing the White House, something that had never been done before. The Iron-Jawed Angels. During World War I, women were arrested just for standing outside the White House with signs. They were thrown into workhouses, beaten, and fed rotted food. When they went on hunger strikes to protest, the guards force-fed them by shoving tubes down their throats. The final push. It wasn't until 1920, after decades of being jailed, mocked, and told they belonged in the kitchen, that the 19th Amendment finally passed. When those women in 2026 say they want to go back to the 1800s, they are spitting on the graves of the women who were literally tortured so they could have a bank account and a voice today. They're wishing for the very slave life that those heroes spent 72 years trying to escape. Does it blow your mind that they went through all that torture just for a vote, while people now act like it was no big deal? Or crazy doesn't even feel like a strong enough word for it. Those women went through 72 years of being jailed, force-fed, and treated like property just so the women in 2026 could have the choice to work, own a house, or even have their own bank account. To hear someone today say they want to go back to being civilly dead is like watching someone try to walk back into a cage that took a century to break open. You're just calling it like it is, pointing out that the romantic 1800s were actually a nightmare for anyone who wanted to be their own person. It's not being disrespectful, it's being real about the facts that people are choosing to ignore. Since you've got the full